Hi again. Hello. Our worship leader today is Nora Mulligan. Nora is Vice President of the UUCHB Board of Trustees, a worship associate, and involved with the choir, the Sharing and Caring Committee, and a longtime member of the congregation. She has led several services in person and online in the past.
May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to these communities, and to each other.
As you can see, we're sharing a computer. The chalice will now be lit upstairs. If you have your own chalice, please light it now too, and let us know that you've done so by typing in the chat. This morning's chalice lighting words are by Walter Royal Jones, Jr. Mindful of truth ever exceeding our knowledge and community ever exceeding our practice, reverently we covenant together, beginning with ourselves as we are, to share the strength of integrity and the heritage of the Spirit in the unending quest for wisdom and love. Now, please join me for our unison affirmation. The words will appear on your screen. Inspired by love, our mission is to seek our true nature, connect deeply and openly, and act for justice. Now, please join us in our next hymn, number 86, Blessed Spirit of My Life. The words will appear on your screen.
Blessed Spirit of my life, give me strength through stress and strife. Help me live with dignity. Let me know serenity. Fill me with a vision. Clear my mind of fear and confusion. When my thoughts go restlessly, let peace find a home in me. Spirit of great mystery, hear the still small voice in me. Help me live my wordless creed as I comfort those in need. Fill me with compassion, be the source of my intuition. Then when life is done for me, let love be my legacy.
Let us now bear witness to the joys and sorrows experienced in our community. If you have a personally significant joy or sorrow, please type it in the chat and I will read it aloud. From Allison McKinney. Sorrow, my friend Cynthia Reynolds, member of FUSW, who I was visiting in hospice, died on Tuesday. I was at the Shiva for her and I got to see how many people's lives she touched. I only ever saw a small part of her influence. She will be missed. From Joanne H. Sorrow, my Uncle Nat passed away last week at 101. He was an amazing man and will be missed. From Karen Sue, trip to the ER this week, thankfully just a severe migraine. From Chris and Megan Fenton, sorrow, my mom was planning to come visit us from Dallas, but decided it was too risky to travel and canceled her trip. I do have a joy that I would like to add. I just returned, actually a week ago now, from a 2-week trip to France, and it was wonderful. Lots of COVID precautions, but we felt very safe. From Lenore Lupi, a candle to honor the life and love of Paul Louis Lupi, 3/24/51 to 8/14/20. From Arlen Roy, my thanks for the many expressions of appreciation and support for my taking on the contract ministry of FUSW. Congratulations. From Sue, I'm really sorry if I don't say your last name correctly, Mikananima? Sorry about that. Happy 8th birthday to grandson Finn Patrick, same last name. From Chris, sorrow, the people of Haiti during the earthquake. They have endured a lot. We also acknowledge all the unspoken joys and sorrows held within the sanctuary of our hearts, and all those who have yet to find a spiritual home where they too can share their joys and sorrows.
Now, please join me in a moment of silent meditation, thinking in love of all our joys and sorrows and of the bonds that bring us together. Okay, before we start,
One-bedroom apartment.
mind.
What exactly does your husband do?
He's a
Sorry, I was going to introduce the video. You were a little fast for me. This is not a great quality video, and I apologize for that. But if you're familiar with the movie, you'll recognize the scene. Okay, from Moonstruck.
I live in a one-bedroom apartment. What exactly does your husband do?
he's a plumber.
Well, that explains that. Temperature's dropping. I guess you can't invite me in.
No,
People home.
no, I think the house is empty. I can't invite you in because I'm married. Because I know who I am. It's different.
I'm a little cold.
You're a little boy and you like to be bad.
We could go to my apartment. You can see how the other half lives.
I'm too old for you.
I'm too old for me. That's my predicament.
Good night.
Good night. Can I kiss you on the cheek, too?
Sure.
Freezing.
Good night.
Good night.
Our reading today is from To Thine Own Self, The Psychology of Authenticity by Ray Herbert. Francesca Gino, Mariam Kuchaki, and Adam Galinsky from the business schools at Harvard, Northwestern, and Columbia, respectively, are interested in the psychological consequences of being true to oneself. Authenticity means not only owning one's own actions, but acting in accordance with one's thoughts, desires, and needs. This commitment is essential for self-regulation, and violating this commitment leads to feelings of inauthenticity, which taint one's moral self-concept and lead to emotional dysregulation. In short, being an imposter to oneself leads to moral and psychological distress. This, at least, is the idea that these scientists tested in a series of laboratory experiments. In all the studies described in a forthcoming issue of the journal Psychological Science, they asked volunteers to recall and write about a time when they felt either authentic or inauthentic, priming those contrasting psychological states. The scientists then compared these two groups of subjects on several measures related to morality with some intriguing results. For example, they found that when people recall feeling inauthentic, they subsequently feel more impure and less moral. They also experience a greater desire for physical cleansing, another way of tapping into impure feelings. So being dishonest with oneself triggers feelings of impurity and a desire for cleanliness. But there's more. This heightened desire to be cleansed in turn made subjects more likely to help others, including donating money to others as a way of compensating for the feelings of immorality. Other negative experiences did not trigger this same cascade of feelings, only inauthenticity. And it was clearly the feelings of moral impurity that boosted the urge to help and serve others.
can leave it there if you.
It's easy enough when you're watching Moonstruck to see how most of the main characters are deluded. They can see other people clearly, but they can't see themselves at all. And they keep running into problems because they've told themselves stories that aren't true, and they're living by those false stories. Take Loretta, for instance, the main character, played by Cher. Years ago, she was widowed when her husband was killed in an accident. She told herself that that was proof that she was unlucky. And as a result, she's closed herself off from life and from love. She still lives with her parents. She does her job. She doesn't seem to have any friends or social life. She thinks so little of herself that she's ready to marry Johnny, played by Danny Aiello, even though she knows perfectly well that she doesn't love him. We can all see, as other members of the cast do, that Johnny is a big baby, unable to take care of himself, unable to make a commitment. Loretta has to tell him what to eat, how to prepare for his upcoming trip to Italy. It's a harbinger of what her life would be like if she married him. A life without joy, a life where she's taking care of an adult baby. She's more than this. She knows she's more than this, but she's settling. She tells herself this is the best she can get. She tells her father that she needs a real wedding in order to have good luck. But what she really needs is to look carefully at herself and see how deserving she is of life and love. Then there's Ronnie, Johnny's brother, played by Nicolas Cage. Years ago, he had an accident that cost him his hand. He blamed his brother, even though he knows it wasn't Johnny's fault. Rather than facing the fact of the accident, he's decided the world isn't worth it. He's histrionic. He threatens to kill himself in front of his coworkers and in front of Loretta, a woman he just met. Then, even though he knows perfectly well that Loretta is engaged to his brother, he throws himself into a passionate affair with her, jumping into bed with her the day that he meets her. If you wanted to think of a more self-destructive way to get involved with the world again, you could hardly do a better job than Ronnie is. Then there's Perry, a college professor, whom we see early in the movie at a restaurant, insulting his much younger date to the point where she throws a drink in his face and stalks out. We see him repeat the scene later with another young woman, another student of his, with the same results. He says something that insults her, she throws her drink at him and then stalks out. One time might be a mistake. Anyone could go out on a bad date, but twice looks like a pattern. Clearly, this guy is deluding himself about relationships. He keeps picking women who are too young for him. Both Loretta and her mother see this. And he keeps setting himself up for public humiliation. You start to wonder what's wrong with him. And finally, there's Loretta's father, Cosmo. Cosmo, a man who's been married to Rose for decades. Cosmo, who when he was first courting Rose, was so crazy about her that he would come and hang around her house at night, haunting her, to the point where Rose's brother thought Cosmo had brought the moon with him to watch over Rose. By this time, however, Cosmo is having an affair with another woman, a woman whom Loretta rightly characterizes as a cheap piece of work, someone as different from Rose as you could imagine. He's giving this woman gifts. He's taking her to the opera with him, while his faithful wife sits home by herself. In some ways, Cosmo is the saddest of these characters. The reason he's involved with another woman? He says, there comes a day when a man realizes his life is built on nothing, and that is a terrible day. Perhaps the other woman, who sucks up to him in such a ridiculous way, you have such a head for knowing, she coos at him. Perhaps she makes him feel important, as if he's worthwhile, but clearly he still feels, deep down, that his life is meaningless. The good thing is that in the midst of all these people making themselves ridiculous, doing things they know they shouldn't do, being utterly inauthentic, there is one character who has her feet firmly planted on the ground, one character who sees herself and everyone else clearly. Rose, the matriarch of the family, played by Olympia Dukakis. The clip we saw is one of my favorite scenes in a movie full of wonderful scenes. Rose is aware that her husband is cheating on her. She tells Loretta this, and Loretta doesn't believe her until Loretta sees Cosmo with his mistress. Rose goes to the restaurant to have dinner by herself. She witnesses the second incident where Perry gets a drink thrown at him, and she invites him to have dinner with her. They have dinner, good conversation, and then he's walking her home. He's clearly attracted to her, and why shouldn't he be? She's an adult after all those young girls he's been throwing himself at. She's at peace with herself, comfortable enough to tell him she's a housewife and not try to build herself up into something she's not. He asks if he can come inside her house with her. And without hesitation, she says no. He jumps to the conclusion that she's afraid someone else will see them. And she says, no, there's no one else at home. I'm not going to invite you in because I'm married and because I know who I am. He ends the scene going home by himself, and she goes into the house by herself. I know who I am. Rose isn't deluded because Rose knows her principles. She knows what's important to her. Even if his wedding vows apparently don't mean much to Cosmo at this point, they're very important to her, and she's not going to risk them. She resists temptation. She's one of the only characters in this movie who does, and she's stronger for it. I know who I am. It's not easy to know who you are on that level. But in order to be an authentic human being, to live according to your values, you have to know who you are. You have to look clearly at yourself and figure out what's actually important. There's so many distractions out there. There are relationships with other people. There's work. There's our busy and hyperactive culture. It's so easy to get turned around. It's so easy to fall into the current and let it take you wherever it happens to take you, to white lies, to affairs, to relationships you know in your heart aren't right for you, to membership in groups that don't align with your values, to conspiracies, to anger, even to violence. It's so easy not to think about these things. Who has the time? Who has the energy? Where's the profit? Shouldn't you be doing 2 or 3 other things instead? Isn't it selfish to step outside of the current and think about yourself and who you really are? Isn't that just navel gazing and time wasting? No, it really isn't. Because unless you know who you are, there's no solid ground under your feet and you can be pushed in any direction. To quote from Hamilton, if you stand for nothing, what will you fall for? To know who you are, you have to look honestly at yourself. And that means you have to look honestly at your past, how you got here. That's something a lot of us have trouble with. It's much easier to make up stories about your past, to sugarcoat your mistakes, your family background, to create a version of your past as a straight line leading you to where you are now. Life isn't like that. It takes courage to look honestly at your past, to acknowledge where you screwed up, to see your wrong turns, your backtrackings, the odd jigs and jags that led you here, the amount of luck, good and bad, that brought you to where you are. It takes courage as a country to confront the truths of our past, to see our history as a messy struggle between our stated ideals and what we really did. It's much easier and much more pleasant to paint a picture of a city on a hill that never did anything wrong. There was always a beacon of democracy and liberty to the rest of the world. Maybe you acknowledge there might have been a blemish here and there, that whole slavery thing, the Native Americans being pushed off their land, the seemingly endless wars. But you can quickly return to the shining image by telling yourself those problems are all in the past and we've taken care of them. We elected an African-American president. Native Americans are running casinos and getting rich. Anyone who wants to make it in America can become a millionaire with hard work. You can even fight tooth and nail against anyone's teaching your children the harder truths of American history, calling it critical race theory, and pretending that learning about the systems of oppression in our history will make it impossible to love the country or to believe in its ideals. You can do that, and a lot of people do. But if you do that, you don't know who you are. And if you don't know who you are, you'll never have the strength to live into your principles. Frankly, you don't have to know who you are in order to see other people clearly, as Moonstruck demonstrates again and again. Cosmo, who's living a false life, nevertheless diagnoses Johnny perfectly from the outset. He's a big baby. Loretta, who's selling herself short from the beginning, is nevertheless able to see through Ronnie's delusion about who he really is and tell him, even before they sleep together, that his accident was his way of freeing himself from a life he knew he really didn't want. Of course, Rose, who does know who she is, sees everyone clearly. She sees her father-in-law taking food off his plate to feed his dogs. And she says another of my favorite lines in the movie, "Oh man, if you give any more of my food to those dogs, I'm gonna kick you till you're dead." She knows Cosmo's having an affair. She sees what a mess Loretta is making of her life. But it's more than that. When you know who you are, you can help other people who are flailing around in their delusion. In Moonstruck, Rose brings Cosmo back to his truest self, the self who loves her, who has values and principles he's been ignoring. She calls him on his affair, tells him to stop seeing the other woman and go to confession, and he agrees. When he tells her what's really been going on in his soul, what the real delusion has been, she shatters it. He says, the day comes when a man realizes his life is built on nothing, and that is a terrible day. She stops him immediately. Your life is not built on nothing, she says. I love you. And that reaches him. That helps him see through the fog he's cast around himself to who he really is, who he always has been. She shows him that his life is built on a rock, the rock of love, the love that has always been there for him, that will always be there for him. If you don't know who you are, what your core principles are, it's frighteningly easy to believe that your life has been built on nothing. And that is a scary thought. And that is a terrible day. But no life is built on nothing. Every life is built on love, whether we acknowledge it or not. Every single one of us has inherent worth and dignity. I believe this with all of my heart. We all lose sight of this sometimes. We forget who we are. We forget what our lives are. We don't give ourselves time to look deeply and see who we are. But our lives, all of our lives, are built on love. When we know who we are, we too can help other people see themselves more clearly. Not by telling them how wrong they are, tempting as that is, not by flaunting our superiority, not by ignoring their delusions, but by reaching out to them in love, as Rose does for Cosmo. It's the strong people who can reach out to others and bring them into reality. And we are strong when we know who we are, and when we live according to who we are, and when we love each other. When we love even the most deluded people, the ones running around and making their lives into a mess and bringing the rest of us with them. Because in the end, as Moonstruck shows us, the way out of delusion is through love. May we see ourselves clearly. May we know who we are. May we be authentic, and may we love. Amen. Blessed be. Sorry. Now let us join in our final hymn, hymn number 1051, We Are. The words will be printed on the screen.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage and fathers of time. We are daughters of dust and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are.
Each week, we make an offering from the bounty that we are blessed to enjoy. We do this in a spirit of love and generosity, aware that we have benefited from those who have gone before, those who in their turn gave generously. Our offering goes to support the work of love and justice undertaken by both of our communities. Today's offering will also be shared in the UUCHV congregation in order to support the mission of our Unitarian Universalist Association. The FUSW congregation is sharing their plate with the Intergroup Association of Alcoholics Anonymous of New York. You can make your donation via credit card or PayPal using the link on your screen or in your newsletter or in your e-newsletter, sorry. Please remember to give a little extra to compensate for the 3% surcharge. Or if you prefer, you can always mail us a check. The offering will now be given and gratefully received. Please join me now in the dedication of the offering. The words will appear on your screen. May these gifts and the work of our hands and hearts give power to always stand for as a community of faith. Now please join me in extinguishing the chalice. The words can be found in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our closing words are from Harry Meserve. From arrogance, pompousness, and from thinking ourselves more important than we are, may some saving sense of humor liberate us. For allowing ourselves to ridicule the faith of others, may we be forgiven. From making war and calling it peace, special privilege and calling it justice, indifference and calling it tolerance, pollution and calling it progress, may we be cured. For telling ourselves corrected, God of our mixed up, tragic, aspiring, doubting, and insurgent lives, help us to be as good in our hearts as we have always wanted to be. Amen.